G'day, I'm Cam from Elevate, and today I'm dishing out my 2 top secrets for corporate and business success. So we're getting 2 for the price of 1 today. Now, I'm going to start out with my first one. And initially, whenever I was asked, what would be my number 1 tip for business success, I would always say that it was about self-development. That is actually having the desire to go out there and learn and to be a sponge for information, to be able to build on our own knowledge bases and skills and expertise. Now, I was introduced to this whole self-learning concept, I guess, quite young. When I was about 19 or 20 years of age, I'd failed my first year of university, and I was carrying off to tell my parents that this had happened, and I was a little bit scared about it. I'd moved out of home, but I needed to move back into home the following year, and so I came to my old man and I said, that this had happened, and he gave me a little bit of a rap on the knuckles, but basically said, okay, I want you to come and work for me over the summer. And so the task that he had me do over that period was, and Dad was he did a lot of public speaking, and so he asked me to go and read a bunch of business books and to be able to abbreviate them and put them all into PowerPoints for him to be able to use in presentations. And so I started out with Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and then I moved on to some Stephen Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And all the time I'm going through, I'm taking notes, and then I'm converting them into these PowerPoint presentations. Now, after those first 2, I fell in love with it, and I managed to punch out about 12 books over that summer before I started and changed my university degree from arts into commerce. But it set me on a lifelong path of learning, and so that was for me a huge head start. Out of interest, I don't think my dad ever used any of the presentations that I put together for him. It was obviously a very sly and cunning plan to set me on the right track. So I'm thankful for that. Anyway, so that's been my kind of number 1 for most of my life. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I started researching a lot more the topic of feedback and the power that we are able to get from feedback is actually quite astounding. And so it's actually taken that whole self-learning from my number 1 to put it back into the number 2 position. Because I'm now saying that the art of being able to ask for feedback constructively is the number 1 skill that you can have in order to be able to be as successful as possible. And I say that because when we ask for feedback, we're generally in a moment. We are dealing with people who know us to some degree. We're dealing with people who have experience in the areas that we're currently working in. And by being able to actually go and ask for feedback constructively, we can get real-time, real data information about how we can make improvements. Now, one thing with feedback is we can choose to do with it what we want. So we may decide to accept that feedback, or we might decide that we know better, or we might decide to park it as something that maybe is feedback that's good for another time. But by doing this, we're able to get multiple different opinions. So feedback should never be asked for simply from one person. We should always look for feedback from multiple people so that we can get more opinions and more data, more information about how would you do this better. And the key to this is not about asking, it's in the way that you ask. And so by that I mean that we need to be able to extract the best possible juices of information that we can from the person who we're asking for feedback from. So I would not go out there and say, do you think I'm doing a good job on this project? Or do you think that my email writing skills are up to scratch? I would ask something far more specific. And I always like to use something along the lines of, if you're in my position, how would you do this better than I have done it? And this does a couple of things. Firstly, it gives permission for the other person to say whatever that they want. You're not saying, what have I done wrong? You're saying, how can I possibly do this better? So that's the first thing. And the second is that it actually shifts their perspective so that they're really actually putting themselves in your shoes and thinking about, okay, what could I do that's possibly better? So for me, that's been the number one now. So step aside self-learning. I still wouldn't, personally, I still read some form of either self-development or business book probably every fortnight. I'm still passionate about it, I still love it, but since I found feedback and understood what the real power was of it, and went from being this mentality of being scared of getting feedback, because I felt like that meant I didn't know or I was doing something wrong, to the new theory, which is I'm using this feedback as a tool for growth. And so that's now my number one. Anyway, there you go, 2 for 1. Hope you get something out of it. Cheers.